right. Hey, everybody. My name is Adam Driscoll, and I am from Ironman Software. And I'm just going to tell you a little bit about myself, a little bit about PowerShell Universal, which I'm showing off over there, and then show just a little demo of what PowerShell Universal does. So I've been around the PowerShell space for a long time. I built PowerShell Universal up from Universal Dashboard. I was, very involved in PowerShell Pro Tools for Visual Studio. I'm a former PowerShell MVP, and I've done a lot with blogging, writing books, YouTubing, and contributing to open source software. So Ironman Software produces PowerShell Universal. So if you've never seen it before, some of the things that it does is script execution and scheduling, HTTP REST APIs, and OpenAPI documentation around your PowerShell scripts. It's got an extensive web UI application framework for actually building tools into websites based on PowerShell script. So you can invoke your PowerShell scripts directly from web pages and run them kind of in a secure environment. It integrates with Git and code-based deployments so that you can take your PowerShell repository from PowerShell Universal and stand up new instances of PowerShell Universal in a code-first manner. And then over the top of the entire application, there's an enterprise security layer for authenticating with things like SAML to OpenID Connect and a bunch of other different kind of security providers. And through that, you can also do authorization based on role-based access and fine-grained authorization inside PowerShell Universal based on your current setup inside your environment. So I do have a 45-minute session about looking at the new features of PowerShell Universal version 5 on Wednesday. So if you want to come watch that session, it's in room 1 at 3 p.m. So I'll be showing off some of the new features in V5, including a new admin console that we built with Blazor. Some of the new features of that admin console, including API tester for your endpoints, a portal, and the permission system built around that. And then a couple other cool things around deploying PowerShell Universal and the PowerShell Universal Gallery. So I'm just going to show off some demo here. If you've never seen PowerShell Universal before, I just want to show off some basic things that you can do with it and give you just kind of an idea of what that looks like. So PowerShell Universal itself is kind of accessed via what we call the admin console. It is a ASP.NET Core web application. This is using Microsoft's Blazor technology to kind of interface with C# and then to your PowerShell scripts. So on this homepage, you'll find information about the jobs that have run in the environment, the number of sessions of users accessing various things inside your environment, and then things like resources and health checks about your environment. One of the major things that people do with PowerShell is run scripts. So there is a script section to add your scripts into PowerShell Universal. We integrate really, really deeply with those scripts in a couple different ways. One being that we actually look at the script and the parameter block and determine what inputs we need for those scripts. So for example, if I were to look at something like this create user script, you can see I have a couple parameters in here: username, first name, last name, secure string for the password and the confirm password, and then a drop down that has the department that this user will be created in. When I click run script for this, you'll see that PowerShell Universal actually looks at that param block, determines what's mandatory, and then enforces that inside this form. And then it also looks at the data type of that particular param, and it will adjust the input based on that. So basic string inputs obviously are just text boxes. Are just text boxes. But if you have something like a secure string, it's actually going to show you a password, a masked text box, and pass it into your script as a secure string. It can get even a little more complex in terms of looking at things like the validate set attribute that was on that parameter, and then generating a dropdown that has those values from the validate set. It also supports things like dynamic parameters and date times and switch parameters, so that it'll have different components based on what you're selecting. In addition to being able to set the parameters and stuff like that, you can also adjust which environments your script will run in, such as running them in Windows PowerShell or PowerShell 7, depending on what your organization is doing. one of the cool new features in PowerShell 5 that I'll actually show up later in my demo on Wednesday is the ability to integrate with like features of PowerShell itself. So, we output things like pipeline data. You'll see those objects inside PowerShell Universal, the different input streams, but we even integrate with things that are like a lot more complex inside the PowerShell ecosystem, one being the actual debugger inside PowerShell Universal. So if you've ever used like any other like scripting environments like GitHub Actions or something like that, it's kind of hard to debug sometimes, and you'll have those like CI check-ins where it's just like failed, green, So the hope here was to be able to actually run and debug your scripts inside the server itself, because sometimes when you run the script locally, it works one way, and then when you run it in an environment like this, it's somewhere completely different and doesn't work that way. So because this has wait debugger in it, it's actually going to hit the breakpoint inside my script, and then that script is going to wait for me to do stuff. So if I were to actually do something like get variable inside here, it's going to allow me to execute that command inside the run space of this script that's running inside my PowerShell Universal server. So I didn't have to like hook up any debugger to it or put a bunch of write hosts in there to try to figure out what's going on. I'm actively debugging my script directly here. So like I said before, there's other things that PowerShell Universal integrates with, including things like read host and all that kind of stuff, to allow you to take advantage of features of PowerShell that you don't normally see inside scripting environments. Another thing that PowerShell Universal provides, which is kind of a common thing you might have seen, solutions such as like Pod and stuff like that, that create REST APIs. PowerShell Universal also has that concept as well. So I have several different HTTP endpoints that I can set up here. I can choose how authentication works, whether it be basic authentication or JWT tokens to access these APIs. And then behind the APIs are just PowerShell script. So this particular API is actually configured to run in Windows PowerShell, and it's just going to get the PS version table and output it. And what's cool about that is I can call this remotely. So if I were to open up a PowerShell prompt here, and I were to call invoke REST method on this PS version table endpoint inside my PowerShell Universal environment, it's actually going to be forwarded off to this Windows PowerShell process behind PowerShell Universal to execute this PowerShell script. And you can see that the PS version that's returned from from PowerShell Universal is 5.1 because it's running in a 5.1 environment in the background. In addition to APIs, the other kind of major thing that people use PowerShell Universal is for UI tool building. So you kind of saw how we could build tools based on param blocks. You can only go so far with that. So what we offer is kind of what historically was Universal Dashboard, but is now available inside PowerShell Universal as PowerShell Universal Apps. So PowerShell Universal Apps allow you to create web pages with PowerShell scripts, and we have about 75 components, and those components are actually extensible, so you can add new components to the ecosystem through PowerShell modules. So one example of what this might look like is I have this Earthquake app, and this Earthquake app is actually up on our PSU gallery that you can just install this module. PowerShell Universal will pick it up. That's just a demonstration of what you can do with it. So if I actually go view that app, you're going to see that I have this earthquake map. This actually went up to the USGS, which is the United States Geological Survey, and they track all the earthquakes in the United States. And I used some PowerShell script just to call invoke REST method, return those data points, and depending on the size of the earthquake, it's going to make the circle larger, and it's also going to change the color in my map. I'm also capable of clicking on these, if I could get the right size, and it'll give you all the information about that earthquake, the magnitude, when it struck, and kind of where it was located. So the way that works inside PowerShell Universal is we have just PowerShell script. So here you can see I'm defining a new app. This is my Giphy app, and it is using invoke REST method to call out to the Giphy API to get a random GIF that includes the dog tag. So we're going to get some dog GIFs. I actually have a secret for my Giphy API key here. PowerShell Universal integrates with Microsoft's secret management module. So this is actually stored in a vault inside PowerShell Universal configuration. So it's not actually in PowerShell Universal, but a vault that PowerShell Universal can talk to. So you never have to store your secrets inside your scripts. And then from there, it's going to call this Giphy API, and then I'm going to extract the actual URL of that Giphy image and then display it on my page. So you'll notice a couple things about this code here. One being that I can call any PowerShell script or PowerShell commandlet that is available to PowerShell Universal. So invoke REST method is just a built-in thing. We're not doing anything special. I'm also doing just regular PowerShell script to store it in a variable. And then I have some special commandlets to kind of update the UI based on what's happening. So I have a button here, and when I click that button, that's when it's going to go do this request out to Giphy. And then after it gets that URL from Giphy, it's going to call sync UD element, which through some WebSocket commandlet or commands back from the browser to your PowerShell script, it's going to update the UI. So that means you can make very, very dynamic UIs inside PowerShell Universal. And when you call this sync UD element, this section of code, which we call a dynamic region, will update with the new image and display the image based on that new URL. So I go click that. You're going to see that I have a cool dog because that was stored in my session. It had actually cached that. But if I click the GIF me button here, it's going to spin. It went out to Giphy, got that random URL, stored it, and then refreshed the browser page with the new URL. So you can imagine this is a pretty silly example, but we've seen very, very cool UIs built around PowerShell Universal in this manner, whether it be extracting data from all different kinds of systems like SCCM or Hyper-V, Azure Enter ID kind of stuff. And then not only displaying it, but because it's so interactive, you can actually create forms and buttons and stuff like that to take additional actions, like maybe turning off a Hyper-V VM or drilling into a user, something like that. But I did something really important and made this Giphy app. So if you find me over there, I have a table. If you have any questions, if you want to see any additional stuff about PowerShell Universal, definitely come find me. Otherwise, I have that session Wednesday, so feel free to drop in and see what's new in the latest version of our product. Thank you.